Hello, Paul and Karen. Welcome back, guys. Been a couple weeks, and I know we've all been bouncing around the continent a little bit, and our nation's birthday, whatever. So, wanted to, kind of catch up with how we all did over this holiday and things we did, I should say, with our families. Paul, I know I caught up with you in Milford, and it looked like you were having a nice little homecoming with the Schulte clan.
Yeah, my oldest daughter, her name is Allie, and you remember our dad's aunt Pat. She would let us go to the beach house a couple times, and so she wanted to recreate her memories with everyone. Then the next thing I know, the whole cruise comes. So I think there was 19 of us that
Oh,
flew on a
That's
flight
wild.
together, managed to pivot and get from JFK to Milford, and then did it in reverse, and did all things Americana. Spent an enormous amount of time at the beach and ate lots of food that I probably shouldn't have eaten as much, and yeah, and just and then obviously got to spend a lot of time with my dad. And just go down memory lane, man. It was a classic, and obviously, no folks that are interested, but Walnut Beach area in Milford is iconic. It's like a page out of a American novel or something. And the 4th of July, the environment there did not disappoint. It came through, and watched the fireworks over the Long Island Sound, and then there was a torrential rainstorm that blew us on. So if you want to put a storybook visit and pull it off with that many bodies. Anytime I could get from JFK and back to JFK with that many folks, I consider it a successful trip.
Definitely. Well, we stopped over, I guess, about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Week ago, yeah, 2 weeks ago, and you had your the whole clan. I gotta say, they were. It made my sister's year, like I said. All your grandkids there. She's like, I still got it. I still got the
Yeah.
touch. Yeah,
They
they were
they
wonderful. So it
loved
was really nice
visiting
to see
with,
them. So
with Bonnie. Yeah, it
yeah.
was fun.
Yeah, great. Super. And Karen, you got to see a little bit of the country from the outside in. You were down in Cancun last few weeks, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we were down in Cancun for like 6 days. We were in a resort, so it's out of the country, but also in kind of
Sure.
its own weird little bubble. So,
Did you
a
see Ted
lot of
Cruz? Did you see,
I'm sorry.
did you see Ted Cruz? That's where he went down to Cancun and during that
No,
snow thing a few years ago. So,
nope. Or, I mean, he could have been there and I just didn't
yeah,
see
sure.
him. I mean, that's
Exactly.
possible too. He could have been hiding behind a palm tree.
Exactly.
But a lot of tourists. So, just very much you're in a different country, but you could be in any country on a resort, because
Sure.
the population is so mixed and, not overwhelmed with Americans as far as I could tell.
Mm.
Really just a pretty diverse mix. I will say a lot of kids and like babies that look like they were born in the airport, and toddlers. And I'm just like, oh, that's not a vacation. That's crazy. And then we came home for about 36 hours and then went up to Maine.
Oh, great.
So
Oh,
we were actually in Maine at the cottage for the 4th.
That's
well, yeah.
awesome.
Um,
Oh, sweet.
That'd
yeah.
be very Americana up there, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they started doing, I don't know, my mother said a few years ago, a boat parade on the
Oh, that's
lake
cool.
on the 4th. And so it's just the residents of the lake who just get their boats out and they just do this loop around the lake and,
Great.
you know, waving and honking horns and whatever. It's really, very neighborhoody,
Mm.
which is interesting because it's a very different kind of a neighborhood because you're all around the lake. Um, and then neighbors were shooting off fireworks and things like that. So it was a less showy kind of 4th.
Mhm.
No big fireworks displays. I'm sure they had them. We just didn't find them. So it was just it was nice to have the two different kinds of vacation. One where you're just kind of sitting out in the sun, relaxing, just the adults, and then one with the family in Maine, with a place that's so familiar and so many family ties and things like that. So
Great.
that was
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome. Yeah, we were on the West Coast and we were in we used to live in Orange County and we were really kind of struck us. It was funny. I don't know if this is your guys' experience. It seemed like it all pulled together kind of late. Like, even like the week before the fourth didn't feel like it was going to be like this special moment. I think in 76 it was you felt it for like months before it seemed like. I imagine I remember my Cub Scout troop, we had all this stuff leading up and all. But we were in Balboa Island in Newport Beach and just, Star Spangled Everywhere, and we had to leave. We had to fly out on the third, and our flight got delayed. We had to land in Detroit to refill, and so we didn't get until the wee hours of the morning on the fourth. So we were kind of still jet lagged through the actual holiday, but it was nice. It was nice to see, but I think, you got that sense. I mean, this is that area of Orange County is an interesting area because it starts to creep into this. It's Southern California, but it's not, it's kind of the Nixon version of Southern California, et cetera. And you had in Reagan, and you had so you had that sense of they're celebrating the fourth, but what are we really celebrating? And that was sort of the sense we got. Really nice, and they had you could just see they were going to have an amazing day, and we contemplated trying to hang over for a couple of days, but kind of got me thinking about this subject of what does the birthday really mean, and where are we at as a country, and kind of got me focused in on again this concept of, we are, we're incredibly blessed to be, born to be citizens of this country, right? Obviously, a lot of people out there would love it, but it also there's a lot of things we go through, and I think especially at this moment in time, a lot of angst in terms of being an American, and kind of it was. I remember when Trump got elected in 2024. First thing I thought of is he's going to be the president on this day, and I think that consternation probably lived up to its billing that I felt back a few years ago. So I know you guys kind of ran into that and ran up against it as we went through the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing because I mean, I don't want to say how young I was in 76 because you guys might hurt me, but I have no conscious memories of
Yeah,
what that was like.
sure.
But I do think that given the state of the country, especially over the last few years, what it means to be an American feels different. And I felt this really leading up to my trip to Denmark, like, oh God, are we going to go there and be viewed as those Americans? And it was a question I actually brought up to my sister in emails before the trip, and I was like, "Is this okay? Like, are we gonna face any backlash?" And she said, "No, Danes really don't ask those kind of questions. They just go about their business." So, and they understand that it's not everybody. Um, so that was a relief, but it was a concern. And I think it was, again, traveling outside of the country to Cancun was like, oh God, is anyone going to say, oh, look, there's a bunch of Americans. And, but like I said, I didn't have the feel of being an overly Americanized resort. So, we didn't bump into that in either places that I went this year. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've always been more of a quietly patriotic person. So I don't know how I would have felt about the 250th birthday, anniversary, whatever we're calling it, if we'd been in different times. But I feel like it got diminished somehow. Because if you don't agree with the way the government is and is being run right now, there isn't the same feeling of national pride. Um, like we're getting behind the World Cup teams in a different way than
Sure.
even getting behind our own. And it's like, it feels not great.
And,
Well,
it,
especially
and I
especially
don't
when we,
know.
we have to play games and the World Cup was sort of an embarrassment to begin with, the way we
Mm.
had to.
The way it played
You're
out.
not going to have something in my LinkedIn piece about this, but the idea that we were finally invited to the adults table and we acted like children. So
Yeah.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was going to say, I think that the nuance is that it seems like there was, and here's the part, Karen, I can remember, but I was still an adolescent, and it's I don't know how accurate my memory is, whether I was looking through, with a different type of lens and stuff. Um, but as I look at things, it seems like there was some unifying type of issues. There were some things that people still came together. I've mentioned on other episodes. Mitch McConnell, not Mitch McConnell, goodness, yeah, O'Donnell working with Hatch back in the 70s and 80s on SNAP. Most people don't understand the so there seems like there was just some things that just superseded that we could come together. The housing bill was an example of that. Just recently, there's something that bipartisan all the way, and then President Trump's got to put his little stamp on it and just make something that should have been a unifying cause, something that we could all come together and celebrate. And I'll be darned, here he
Well,
comes again.
did you see on that he and again I'm going to assume they've got a game on that one, but he didn't veto it, didn't sign
Right,
it,
he's
so it
just
goes
going
in
to let it go.
law.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how he thought that was going to hurt him, politically. It's insane how that, and again, it's we all want that,
And
right?
a great example of, even in these toxic times, there are some things that supersede
Yeah.
the partisan, the divide. Housing is something everybody wants their kids and their grandkids to have available to them. And again, like I said, he comes in and just he screws up. And I'm not even talking about the policy, just the feel of the country, something that was
Mhm.
which is really silly because he, get on the coattails and take credit for something.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Put
feel
all your
like though,
bipartisan people behind you and sign the thing.
I feel like though it goes back to him not being able to take credit for it,
Right.
right? Like that got done, like you said, bipartisan support. It was all agreed upon beforehand. All he had to do was sign it, but he couldn't really put his name on it. He couldn't say, I did this. And, again, I think for a person who really needs and feeds off of the attention and the go rah rah thing, it didn't match up with what he needs.
Years ago, when I was principal at one of the schools in Salt Lake, the National Honor Society, the National Association of Secondary Principals, have kind of a leadership scholarship. And I would bring in the 3 or 4 finalists. The faculty would kind of weed them through, and I would interview them. I say, okay, tell me what leadership means to you, and I'd get, being a good example and lots of different things. And it was amazing to me. But I only had one kid every year say this: that leadership was service, and that's who
Mm,
would get the scholarship. And there's a principle, I think, not just for a president, but for all of us. I think that's what being patriotic is about, seeing someone else, lifting people up without necessarily anybody ever noticing. Uh,
mhm,
and we had the absolute amoral worst example during our 250th. And, our forefathers, they had some major hiccups, but at the end of the day, they were still focused on service. And
mhm.
that gets back to what you said about the bill. None of the politics is about serving and betterment. At least I'm making the assumption. I may be inaccurate, but I don't see policy coming from him or actions that is really about focused on servicing what are the least of our people, right? Um,
Mhm.
and that was an example, that bill, and that same thing we got, before he got elected in 24, that they had a bipartisan immigration bill that he just called up and said, "Don't do it." So, um,
I think one of the things it's an interesting connection, Paul, as you talk about 76. And I think one of the things I felt and kind of, looking back and again, falling between you and Karen, old enough to remember, not old enough to remember well, but it was a moment where the country was coming off a lot of bad things, and we were still in the middle of stagflation, but we've come off Vietnam, we're coming off Watergate. And I think the country, and it really in its wisdom, and this is what I think the world's always relied on, the wisdom of the country, use it as a chance to reconcile. And I don't think it was,
yes,
when I think we were going through that process. Ford was still president. And that's where the moment, maybe it's just because of the trajectory we're at, we're not at the reconciliation moment yet, but that's an opportunity obviously missed. But I think that one of the things, today with the death of Lindsey Graham, we saw, I think again, and we can go here a little bit with the they go low, we go high, but it was a moment where Democrats didn't say, hey, remember what Trump said about Bob Mueller? They said they went high. And I
yeah,
think and I think Lindsey Graham is a complicated person to begin with. He's got a complicated, he probably figured he was going to get a chance to cure his legacy before he was said and done. He's not going to get that chance. But I think it was a moment where maybe we saw some inkling of national reconciliation today through this death,
yeah.
with things we saw today coming from the Democratic Party. So, but I think that's what we've learned, frankly, about 76 and this whole thing, that it was a low point for America, but we started to turn the corner from those low points.
Yeah. It was definitely leverage, um, and it goes right back to Watergate, which is interesting with J.D. Vance's statements on Watergate in the last few weeks. But um, you know, there was a group of Republicans that went to the White House, said, President Nixon, it's the game is over, and then Ford pardoned him, uh, which he didn't get a lot of, too much pushback on. I think folks just wanted to move on, and but there was a group of men at that time. It was almost all men. Went to him and just said, "Hey, we can't back this up," and we don't see that moral courage or statement. We've seen a few in the last, whether it's the slush fund for the January 6th folks and things like that. There's been a few things that are gone too far, even for the GOP at this point. But 76 was different and had a different feel. But I do think you're correct, Greg. I think communities, where I was in Milford, Connecticut, and that little community of Walnut Beach is just iconic, almost out of, picture show. I think folks at the last second kind of rallied and tried to get a little celebratory.
We went through it was definitely, I guess it was the afternoon, it was the 4th. It was actually an afternoon, and we were still jet lagged, but you could see there was sort of an excitement in the area.
Yeah,
You could see it coming. Yeah, I think it's funny, you think about 2076, 2026. In the middle is 2001. So basically, you're talking then about what Al Gore did, and
yep,
Al Gore, probably more than anybody in American history had the ability to push that election, and he recognized this is what I think the in 70, and I think Ford did. Ford's, I think, election was always in peril because he pardoned Nixon,
exactly.
and I think but he understood the country. He felt he was doing what was right for the country. I think Gore the same thing, that he undermining the next president wasn't worth his maybe slim chance of overturning it. I don't think most of the politicians today would have handled that way, and I'm left or the right. I think they'd say, we got to win at all costs, and that's a part of our fabric that's missing now. So, I think that but I think again it's taught us some interesting lessons over the last few weeks in terms of who we are.
And it comes down to, again, I'm repeating myself, but do we want to win elections? Do we want position for power, or do we want positions of our neighbors and our community and our country? And that's the big question. And I've mentioned this a number of times, but I go back to immigration. You know what? I don't give a crap about the wall right now. Give me something that's a solution. If you don't like but getting more ICE agents and creating more detention centers, that's not the solution. So, I'm looking for some leadership that provides solution rather than just, the boogeyman and pointing the finger and demonizing people in the sense of just so I can get elected, so I can get power. And obviously this, I think, Karin, you mentioned it one of these weeks, but obviously, Trump's second presidency is like, hey, any way we can make a buck, let's let's do it. It's not even subtle anymore. It's like grift. Let's get it. Let's get the cash from this presidency. And so I guess I'm just naive. I'm just like, can we just get people that want to serve and be kind?
He openly said that his kids get all insider information.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Martha Stewart's got to be ripping mad right now.
Yeah.
Him calling was minor leagues compared to this. Hey, Karin, you were in Maine. I know the Plantner stuff came out after you left, probably. I don't know if you were there, but were you there when that? I don't know how long you stayed after the 4th, but I didn't know if you got any wind of that. That was always that seems like that candidacy was in peril for a while.
That was
But
a train wreck from the
you caught into it all when you were there?
The sexual assault revelation or accusation came out while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
Him stepping down or removing himself happened after we left. So, again, when you're up in Maine, in that part of Maine, you don't necessarily run into a lot of people. So, we didn't hear a ton of local opinion about that. But yeah, that kind of, I think if we had been in Portland,
Yeah,
we
sure.
probably would have heard a lot more. Palermo, Belfast is
Yeah,
pretty sparse.
sure.
So no, we didn't hear a whole bunch, but it was like, the again, the irony that what ultimately had him dropping out of, the race was an accusation of sexual assault.
Mhm.
Okay, we have someone convicted
Yeah.
of sexual assault in the White House right now. Sure. Okay, this makes sense.
Exactly.
Um, so not, and again, as a social worker, as a woman, as a wife and a mother of
Mhm.
sons, obviously, if that was the case, and I always, innocent until proven guilty, but also believe the accuser before, the potential offender. If that's the case, of course, not, but like again, the irony of where the morals are, and now all of a sudden we've got to shake our fists and rail against this. How dare this person try to run to be an elected representative of our country, of our people, when he's done these horrible things? And it's like, really, because you haven't even scratched the surface of what's
Sure.
currently living in the halls of,
Definitely.
the White House, Congress, all the Senate, all of that. And it's maddening. It really, and Paul,
Sure.
you said something about, the housing bill being something that people could get behind as a unifying force. And while I think that's great, it's also really frustrating that that's the only thing we can get together on across
No
the
doubt.
aisle,
Yeah, no
right?
doubt.
Like Roe versus Wade, no.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Women having the right to make their own healthcare decisions, no. Immigration, refugees, no, no, no. It's just
I agree.
that's, and I think it really, again, it has to do with what is the safest thing for people to unify behind that will save them votes,
Yeah,
right?
and not put them out there, just not take it as conservative as you get. And I always throw out there, universal health care. Cut
Right.
defense, get us health care
Hmm.
like yesterday.
Yeah. Yep.
you know,
Education.
which would
Fun.
include, oh yeah, which would include, to me, the women's right, because that
Hmm.
should universal health care would be
Yep.
inclusive of women's health.
Rumor has it women are humans. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and and again, I always, when I run into people who talk, well, first of all, I think there's sort of a synergy here between one of the things that drives me crazy is people wrap themselves in the flag, but yet they want to degrade our government at any time. Like to them, our government bad, America good. Well, our government is America. It's hard to be patriotic without hating our government. And Michael Lewis has a really interesting book, The Fifth Risk, and he talks a lot about. He's done a lot of writing in the Washington Post about as well about the amazing people who work for our government. Frankly, don't make a lot of money doing it. Can make a lot more money in the private sector, but they do it out of service, do it out of loyalty, and we talked a lot about service. But I think that when we're talking about Social Security, so if you're talking about, or sorry, Medicare, if you're talking about Medicare for all, what people don't realize, and I think this actually has a synergy to the private prisons. So they like to claim that private prisons on a per prisoner basis that we pay as much for private prison as we do if they're in a public prison. But the truth is the private prisons won't take expensive prisoners. They don't take prisoners who have diseases. They won't take violent prisoners. They take the prisoners they want to take, and then they charge us basically the average is what's basically the common conception. So, well, the average they should be below average on costs because they're not taking expensive prisoners, and that's kind of the same thing you get with Social Security. People like to use, or sorry, Social Security, Medicare. People like to use the Medicare metrics against the total population in general, but Medicare is, for the most part, other than Medicaid, is taking the most expensive patients. And at the
Exactly.
end of the day, Medicare is the cheapest, fastest delivery of healthcare in this country. And it doesn't have all these layers of bureaucracy in it that we're paying out, billions of dollars of bonuses and this and that too. So you get this sort of wraparound that, well, Medicare for all is going to be less efficient. It's like, no
No,
data points show us that. And we
no,
know we know that the corporate healthcare insurance system is not delivering healthcare nearly with the level of care that Medicare is. And this is what drives you crazy. Again, that's to go off on a rant here, but this is why we can't have nice things kind of thing, because we got these arguments that aren't real.
I think that's a similar argument to, funding public
Yeah,
education
exactly.
because, private schools, charter schools don't have to take the kids with the IEPs. They
Yeah.
don't have to take the medically fragile. They don't have to take the kids that need the services. And yet the charter schools are getting the vouchers from the whatever the average cost is.
Mhm.
If you have a kid that goes through school and doesn't need an IEP and doesn't need any special services, their cost is negligible. You get a kid who needs PT, OT, speech, therapy, um, adapted PE, all of those things. The cost is massive. And a private school, a charter school can say, no, they don't meet our criteria. We don't have to
Yeah.
take them.
And
Yeah.
those are not a small percentage of kids at this point in time. It's definitely
No,
much larger than it
Yeah.
was when we were there, right?
no,
So as you guys
no.
both know, I'm
And
sure.
yeah, and it's oh well, private schools are giving kids the individualized attention and smaller class sizes. Well, of course, they
Yeah.
have the funds to do it. And public schools are being stripped of those funds.
And
Uh,
the voucher is never enough for the family who's, living on probably even middle
Yeah,
class to pay for
it's
the
supposed
private school. It just
mhm,
gives a break to the rich who could have afforded the private school to begin with, or were
exactly.
affording it. They just want a little kickback on it. So
Yep.
yeah. And I
I was Eric, Karen. I was just thinking that thought now. In Utah, charter school is a public school, so they're funded publicly. Where the private schools, that's where the vouchers come in. They can take your voucher. But what Greg said is 100% accurate. You might be fortunate if your voucher covers 50% of a private school. And that would be like a parochial school,
Hmm.
less
Right.
expensive. And so really it's just a tax break for the wealthy, just offsets their costs to send their kids to a private school. And they have another program that's called, I want to say Education for All. I can't remember. But anyways, but you can get a voucher here, and the audit just came out from the state, and so you can get them. I think about $8,000, might be six for depending on how old the kid is and whatnot. And homeschoolers are getting so then
Mm,
they've been buying ski passes, renting, buying musical.
fantastic.
Now they've put some constraints on it the last few years, but they're nowhere as where they need to be. So these folks are getting money, they're homeschooling their kids, and they're turning a profit. Uh,
Hmm.
and so, so that's obviously money that's always being taken away from the public schools. So it's an interesting. But what you said about the private schools can really cherry pick and get what they want. The children
Yep.
that don't have necessarily the need for significant services, and
Hmm.
then you run down the highway and you see their billboards about how wonderful they are, or the bleep on their television, and
Yeah.
it's highly
And you
inaccurate, and they
right.
don't
And
they don't educate at all.
I don't know about other states, but in Rhode Island, the private schools are not allowed to recruit athletes from
Right.
public schools. But, just because you're not actively out in the open recruiting, you're still courting families who
Yeah.
have kids who are good athletes or whatever. And it's not usually academic, it's the athletes, right? Because they're the schools that can get the college scouts to come and those kind of things. So it's a very subtle
Yeah, there's
recruitment.
always a way to, I was on the executive committee for a period of time and on the board of trustees for the Utah High School Activity Association, and I sat on quite a few hearings relative to recruiting and whatnot. And so it's not a coach that goes out and recruits or anything, but it's a parent of somebody or someone that lives in the neighborhood or someone that goes and it's just like anything. It's like the NCAA. There's ways of doing it
Mhm.
without
Well,
any nuance to be obvious.
it's marketing what they already have,
Right.
right? Because they have the funding from private payers, right?
Yeah.
They are able to have smaller class sizes. They are able to have more options for academics and better equipment and things like that. And it's not that that's not a good thing. If you can afford it and that's your priority or a religious based education, that's great. The problem is when it takes the money away from public schools where those aren't options for the families.
And it creates a downward spiral for the public schools because now those funds have to come from somewhere, and now they're
Hmm.
getting underfunded.
Yeah, I mean it's a big deal when someone ends up in a position, even in the government, whether it's the House or the Senate or these type of folks, and people actually mention it. This person's a byproduct of public schools. It's like, oh wow, we've got someone from, that has, these organic roots
God
rather than,
forbid. God
yeah,
forbid.
rather than,
They've come from the
IBB
wrong side of the
schools.
tracks.
Right. Those, I always tell the longer I live, the more I realize how uh, challenged my folks were for quite a few years there, and the resources that they had. Great grandpa's farm kept us fed for many years when things were a little tight. So we're a byproduct, and that's why I always point to folks. To me, I said, you talk about Pell Grants and these type of things and student loans, and you know, I'm a byproduct of that, and I have more than paid back. The investment that the country made in me has come back many times over by by what I've earned and the taxes I pay, and my kids are now paying, and so that's you know proves or validates the programs, and I see when they're trying to they're in the courts right now trying to decrease what nurses. They don't want that. They want to decrease the amount of student loans kids that are going to become nurses are going to. Who in their right mind would think that that's a good policy?
Crazy. I mean, it's beyond nursing now. I mean, we have Gary's daughter, Leah's gonna go to medical school. It's getting even people to be doctors now with the
Yeah,
economics of medicine are just for the work for the employees are crazy, and it's,
Well, I mean,
you know,
I don't think there's ever been a really well done and readily available loan repayment program for social workers.
no, yeah, and they should be. They should be right in there. Particularly, Allie got some of her loans forgiven. She spent 10 years, and she still is, in an urban setting, and that's how she had a lot of hers forgiven. And that's great. It worked out. It worked out
Yeah,
both
no, I
for
mean,
her, and it worked out. And so there should be for social workers, and it should be
right.
widespread. Those type of incentives.
Well, and it's one of those things, right? Like, again, the idea is to pit the professions against each other. Well, wait a minute,
Right.
why does the teacher get it, not the social worker?
Right.
No, the point is that anybody who's doing the work that is underpaid, yet you need a certain level of education, should be eligible for this. But the flip side to that is, why does this cost so much money?
Well,
I
there's
can't,
another whole conversation.
I mean, and so this is, I always try to look at things from the preventative lens. Like, sure, it's great to forgive the loans afterwards, but why are we
yeah,
requiring people to take out those loans? When I graduated with my master's in social work in 1999, I came out with just loans from the graduate program, and it was 100% loans, $30,000 for
Yeah.
3 years at BU. It took me, I think, 4 years to make $30,000.
Wow.
So I was already underwater with the
Yep.
amount of loans that I had for my master's degree that I needed in order to do the work as a social worker. Because with a bachelor's in social work, you're stuck at case manager,
Right.
which was maybe $1 more than minimum wage at the time. It was not. It still isn't lucrative at all. But why? If you're still not going to pay social workers and teachers above poverty level, why do you have to borrow so much money
yeah.
Right.
to get those degrees?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Like, make it make
Well,
sense.
and we were talking about it today. My son Ephraim was over with his girlfriend, and we were talking about because he hates college, but he's got to get it done to be his teaching degree. He's finally figured out that's what he wants to do. But we were talking about when I got my first master's degree, I received it. I want to say in 2000, right around there, back in the 80s. Paul apologized, and Ginny and I looked at each other. Somehow, we had a bunch of kids, and I was teaching and coaching and busy as all heck. But we found the resources at that time in the 80s. We could pay as we went. Turn around and get my second master's degree to go into administration. So this would have been right around 96 to 2000. I had 20,000. So we're talking about a decade or two, and that's what happened with the cost, right? It just initially in the 80s I could pay as I go. I get around 2000, I had to take a loan to pay for it,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's the growth, and it's gotten substantially worse. And why is it? That's why folks. I was going to talk about this a little bit. How quickly after the New York primary, when all the Democratic Socialists won their primaries, and now it doesn't take long for folks to try to divide the Democratic Party up and trying to pit folks against each other. But all of our allies are Democratic socialist societies. They have colleges, but you don't have to pay for college. You have the university. So somehow every country, developed country, that's what I was looking for, besides us, has figured out how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But they were saying in the World Cup, and I don't know, it might have been after the first round that every other country's got socialized medicine except for
Exactly.
all the other 31 that were in the next round. But no, I think you're right, and I think it's again, I think it just leads to a better quality of life at the end of the day. This getting away from this whole idea that everything's a gamble, everything's a risk reward scenario, and again, I love the analysis that capitalism means some people can be rich, socialism or communism means nobody can be rich. Socialism means some people are rich, but nobody's going to be poor, and that's the concept I think that works, and I think that's where quality of life around the world exists. What we're giving
Well,
up.
I think we really have to try to shed this mentality of if if we're all getting what we need, somebody's ahead of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean, when I worked in the clinical day schools, we would tell the kids all the time, fair is not equal.
Mm-hmm.
Fair is what everybody needs to be successful.
Yeah.
And they might need a calculator and you don't. That doesn't mean you get a calculator to help you figure out your math problems faster. Like you don't need that, or you don't need manipulatives, or you don't need, you know, large print books or whatever. Like you get what you need, not what everybody else has. That's not what equality is supposed to be. But I think that's the fear in socialism, right? Is that, well, they're getting something I'm not. Well, I don't need a quadruple bypass, thank God. So the fact that you're getting that, your medical coverage is paying for that. I need insulin. You don't need externally injected insulin. So why would we give that to you? That doesn't make any sense.
And what you say makes I was going to say it makes sense. It's more than that. It's just morally, the right way to be. And the thing that's really peculiar to me is, isn't there joy in someone getting what they need, and the right, not, and I want to be very careful when I say this, not all right people, but the platform and the selling point is that, okay, we know this is, the system is fraud. Well, yeah, there is fraud, but it's not impacting the vast majority of people that I see. So I should have joy in saying, oh, you're getting the bypass and it's not going to make you file bankruptcy. I'm really happy, and I'm happy that my resources, the taxes I may pay, will help you, or you're getting, and so, but has that spirit of loving our fellow neighbors and just being happy for folks and just or just assuming the worst of everybody, you must be fraudulent, and it happens. But the vast majority helps people that need that need the help. I don't even want to say help, get what they deserve is more of a better way of saying it.
Well, I think we can go to like a sporting analysis and example here. It's like, we're seeing obviously, and as we've seen during the World Cup, the primary advertisers being gambling sites. We have a problem with gambling in sports right now. There's probably events, every day that are affected by it. We don't stop. Nobody's going to stop watching sports because there's some, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Use the
Right.
expression is that we deal with the problems, but doesn't mean we get rid of the concept,
Yeah.
just because we've got some issues we have to deal with,
Well, and I think on a personal level, I don't think we've lost our humanity entirely, right? I think most of the people in this country, if you're talking about your neighbors, your friends, your family, you're absolutely happy for them that they don't have to do a GoFundMe, right? To raise money for a funeral, right? To whatever. I think it's when it gets further out is when people start getting squirrely about it, right? It's like nobody's a racist, or not nobody, but people aren't racist to your face. If they know you as an individual, it's a lot harder to be racist. it's the person taking your job. It's the person who's going to carjack you. It's the scary person who's going to rape you, right? Um, I mean, I've had friends who are very racist look at me and say, "Well, you're different. You're not that kind of minority." And it's like, oh, um, thanks, right? So I think on an individual level, people do have morality. People do
I
have
agree.
goodwill
Yep.
for each other. I think it's when it gets further out, there's some, and I don't think it's really a mystery. I think there's actively people feeding that fear. I mean, that was the whole propaganda of the Nazis,
Mhm.
right?
That's right.
Some group is to blame for why you're not better off, even if you're doing okay.
Yeah.
And that fear just, it's pervasive. And that idea that, oh my God, somebody's getting something that I'm not. And I think we need to really shed a lot of that and really start thinking of us ourselves as more of a global community, not just the people you see and wave to every day as you're pulling in and out of your driveway.
Right.
There's actually an interesting piece that was done. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name now. I know it's going to come to me, but years ago, it's the whole concept was built around the guy from the Cubs fan a few years ago who put out his glove, there in
Yeah.
2003. I know the name's on the tip of my tongue, but the whole show was built around the concept of scapegoating. So he became the scapegoat for them losing. And the truth is that there's a lot of reasons why they may have lost that game anyway. But but crowd mentalities need a scapegoat, and that's where I'll be talking to people. And I'll be discussing our current situation without labeling, and they'll say, well, it's not like fascism because they're not anti-Semitic. And well, that remains to be seen. But it's like, well, it's not about being anti-Semitic, it's about creating scapegoats. And that they obviously create scapegoats. And it's a real interesting human phenomena about this need to blame people for your problems. And that's the common thread. And that's what people are missing. And that's where I think we as Americans now, and I think it's fear driven. And I think people play on those fears to say, hey, your problem isn't because of you, it's because of this scapegoat. And that's where we've hit in this country.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's scary because there was, for we're still sort of on the citizenship thing.
yeah,
As a naturalized citizen, I mean, I came here when I was 4 months old. I was a naturalized citizen probably before, I don't even know exactly when, but as a toddler. Um, a year ago, we took a vacation to Aruba, and my mother was terrified. "Ooh, what if you get deported? What if you get deported? I hope they don't send you to El Salvador." And first of all, being deported is a problem. El Salvador is a whole different problem.
exactly.
But it
Yeah.
is that because I'm far more identifiable to have my documents scrutinized, right, than if I was a white man who was also a naturalized citizen, or light-skinned man. And so, even though I was not technically born in the USA, thanks, Bruce, it was, it's still that fear of, okay, so if you're going to take away birthright citizenship, and then what's next? People who weren't born here and got naturalized became citizens. So, again, you're still pointing the finger at some group in general, right? It doesn't even have to be as specific as from country X or Y or Z, right? They're throwing a broad brush, painting it with a broad brush.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is a similar. Now, this is a similar pattern. So we'll go through just a couple examples. Okay, so now we have vote by mail. It's an issue that doesn't exist, right? But
Yeah.
we're gonna have we got to pass the Save America Act, but it doesn't exist. Well, the birther thing, it doesn't exist. There's tourism birth. Yeah, it happens, but it's not a prevalent issue.
no.
And so in that spirit of what you're talking, Greg and you are both talking about, someone else is responsible for my problem, and so we lean into these, uh, trying to create these issues, and and we could spend our time and our resources and our collective brains on things that really could impact and help the entire community. And again, I just I sound like a broken record, but so what's the why? Why do you want to pass these? It's because so I can maintain the power. At least that's the only assumption I can come in, because I can see some folks that have different, philosophies on policies, and there may be two different, approaches to it. But you can say, well, I don't really like that approach, but I can see you're trying to do something well-meaning. But this, I can't find a silver lining. I can't find any meaningful purpose for some of these policies or issues that takes up so much time and energy in the national community and dialogue. They're just statistically non-issues.
I mean, I think it's the fear thing, but I also think, you can't lose sight of the fact that it's Epstein distraction.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I think
the
that's
grifting.
I think that's the current reason, but I do think that if you look at you just think about the pure math of the situation is, you've got, let's say, 1 to 2% of the population, and not all of them even who want to keep taxes low. They can't win elections with 1 to 2% of the population keeping their taxes low. So they need to create, a broad, and again, they don't necessarily need 50%. They've proven that pretty effectively. They need somewhere in the 40s, and they've got to cobble together issues that, hit the nerve of people that, and again, that they, in a sense, will start to vote against their own self-interest. And I think that's where this comes with, to your point, Paul, is, yeah, these things are not pressing issues, but God knows they can make them look like pressing issues to the people they want to make them look to. And
Well, and they also trying
yeah,
to scare away people who,
yeah,
for example, me, right? If
yeah,
my name doesn't match on my birth certificate, well, first of all, I don't have a birth certificate, which is a whole different story. But,
sure,
if I have to prove my citizenship and I'm worried about being harassed, maybe I just won't vote,
Right.
because is it worth me being potentially arrested? Because, before you could say, well, that won't happen. Well, it has.
yeah,
So, again, chase away enough of those people, put that fear in, not even of my neighbors, not even of the voting officials. The fear for me is today the day that the federal officials are going to come down and take anyone that they think doesn't look right
yeah.
and harass them, arrest them, drag them out.
And
I don't know.
there's a lot of, and Karen, I'm sure, you somebody like yourself, you're gonna be up for that challenge. You're gonna go out there, but there's a certain percentage of people who are gonna say, you know what, just not worth it. Just
Nope.
they're not engaged enough. They don't see the risk, and they're just not gonna be worth it for them to go down to the
But here's
voting.
the irony, in 24, this is where their strategy could be very convoluted and against their own self-interest. In 24, Trump turned around the Hispanic vote.
Yeah.
So is he really thinking? Well, I don't know if he thinks anything through, but I mean, really, he might be, working against his own interests, because he could be impacting the turnout. Well, first of all, most of the polls show that he's upside down with the Hispanic community now after 24. But if you keep folks away, so it's been that nuance has left. But again, I'm a broken record of say, what's the why? Why do you want those policies? What is it? And the only thing I can come down is I just want to stay in power. I don't really want to do well for my community, for my kids and my grandkids, of course, maybe so if you're in power and you look the certain type that will benefit from those type of things. But I'm hopeful that people, like Karen says, I think the majority of folks want well for their neighbors and their communities. Unfortunately, not enough of those are in power.
Definitely.
No.
But I think it's going to be, I think it's what scares you when you start to, and my wife and I were talking about this morning, is it feels like they're playing some of these games already.
Oh yeah,
they're broadcasting out that they, don't want to do mail-in ballots for states that don't turn over their election lists. And thankfully we got Mark Elias on that, et cetera. But it's like, okay, what's their game that they're giving this in July? Shouldn't they be wanting to hold this till it can't really be fully litigated in September, October? Like, in my mind is, are
I don't
they?
think he's smart enough. I think he's worried about midterms.
Well, I think
He's
it's,
not looking beyond that.
no. I'm saying, but why start to play the game now when you play it closer? You
Oh,
try
you
to
think because he's still doing it early enough, there's enough time to
just,
litigate it before midterm.
yeah, exactly.
I got you.
So the question in my mind is there a little bit of a look this way, but you don't know what the other hand's doing. So, and again, there's with Trump, there's always been a problem is he playing three-dimensional chess or does he not even know how to play checkers? It's the guessing game I think we're always in. Are they too smart? Or are they too stupid? And day to day, I can make an
I
argument either
I also, I
way.
mean, I think that he's definitely cognitively impaired.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty apparent to anyone at this point. But I also think you've got kind of the Hydra, right? You've got so many heads talking about different things, and everybody's out for their own self-interest. So I'm not even sure it's that they're stupid, because I think that's selling. I think that's too easy for us to just, oh, don't worry about it. They're too stupid. They're going to sink themselves. I think we have to be really careful about dismissing them. I think they're just, all the heads are going in different directions, and each one thinks that they have the answer. And so they're not collaborating and talking with the others. They're not formulating a game plan. They've clearly never coached, right? So it's not like, okay, here's the play, and then this, and then that. It's not sequential at all. Or if this, then that. It is all over the place, and everybody's fighting each other and themselves. And I think that's why it's so all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, the nuance with Trump on his Air Force One not being prepared, and then he had to pivot and do different flight plans because his little gift wasn't ready and didn't have the appropriate security. From what I understand, he just had a mental meltdown because of that. But that's his inner circle. I'm sure he got his pound of flesh from a number of people. And again, a great example of they're not all on the same page. And obviously Trump wants everyone to be loyal to him, but he's loyal to no one. He will fire you within the moment if you're not on the page that he wants you to be on.
Definitely. I think that's where, and again, I think you might even see some that come out with Lindsey Graham now, whatever, that, his ability to throw people under the bus to protect his own self-interest knows no bounds.
But how does he get him back on his team? That's that'll be the question and the legacy that will go down, and we'll be scratching our heads for decades because okay, if I'm a video history, I'm going to do a Netflix special in 20 years. So I'm going to show the 2016 primary debates in the GOP, and I'm going to show a clip of Trump throwing Rubio under the bus and his wife and stuff. And then I'm going to show a clip of him kissing the ring. Do with Graham and stuff. And I think people
Lee.
Yeah,
Dance.
for a decade, people are going to be scratching their head and saying, how did he facilitate these folks coming on board?
Yeah.
Money, promises, blackmail.
Yeah.
Like because once you're part of this, yes. Yeah. I mean, I think once you're part of the firm, so to speak, right? You're in it. You've got blood on your hands now. And they know where, somebody knows where the bodies are buried, and somebody has your voice on it, your signature, your email. So if it's not, I'm going to fund your whatever project, house, whatever, you better do it, or I'll leak the tapes to the newspaper, to the media, to the press, whatever. So I don't think it's loyalty. I think once you're in it, you're a marked person, and you go along because, well, at least right now I'm protected.
Yeah.
Right. He's not going to sick his MAGA dogs on me.
Yeah.
Right. We're not going to get swatted.
Obviously, he can beat people in the primary. He can't win the general election. Normally his token votes, but he will primary people out. I mean, he does that time and time again. I was always shocked in 2016 when Romney even met with him after he won the election, and I think he was a runner for the Secretary of State at the time. But I was just shocked that he even entertained and sit down with Trump at the time.
It was at a restaurant in New York City. I can remember that picture of him.
Yeah.
That's I'm sure it's something Romney probably wants to. He probably used all his power to get rid of all the. So,
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Well, Romney's interesting because he's really pushing the narrative of changing the guard, just saying, hey, we
Yep.
need a new generation to start stepping up and looking into leadership. So it's kind of interesting to follow
Well,
his
he had some pretty
nuances.
provocative comments in the last couple of weeks about the rich paying their share, and then
Yep.
obviously that was not around the 2012.
No,
So that's been a pretty stark change for him over the years.
I
You
think when
know,
you get older and you look at your posterity,
yeah,
because I don't care how wealthy you are, um, all your grandchildren, all your great grandchildren, not everyone's going to end up in a situation that um, your wealth is going to take care of. So I think you start to look at things differently when you get a few years under your belt.
well,
You
also I
can't
think if
take it
the
with you.
again,
Yep.
also if the country continues to become destabilized, the wealth almost it's almost that the irony is the wealth could become immaterial. It could become, we get into some sort of, you take it down the road and a little imagination, where's is the wealth going to matter? And so everything he's tried to build for the future Romney generations and never have to work a day in their lives if they don't want to, may all be for naught. So I think, it's almost like
Well,
they,
Warren Buffett says the same thing. He's always saying, "Hey, I'm happy to write my check,"
yeah,
and
yeah,
So those again, and
yeah,
that so it's supporting what you said, Karen. Those are those folks that do have that moral foundation that they get it right, and
Right.
that's why I always look at uh, Mackenzie and all the money she's giving away. The
Yeah.
best thing she ever did was get that divorce so she could go and help others.
Right.
And
Well,
so
I mean,
many other ways the divorce was probably great as well.
yeah.
but I mean, Romney, I mean, he came from a religious place, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so, you know, perhaps he's really, he's putting himself to the test, right? The hardest test that I think, I'll say Christians because I'm not familiar with other religions as well, but the Christians have to put themselves through is if you really believe in the Bible and Christianity, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man into heaven,
Yeah.
right? So like, I don't know. I don't know what his connection with his own religion is, but as you said, Paul, a few years
He's
under your
he's very
belt,
he's a very faithful and active participant in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Very
right?
much.
And that's what I've understood him to be. And so, maybe as you're getting a few more years under your belt and you're a little bit closer to potentially being judged, maybe you start thinking a little bit more about other people, not just your own progression and wealth and progress.
And when you don't have to win a primary anymore, and you don't have to win an election a little bit more, I think you can be a little more pragmatic in how
Hmm.
you approach your resources and stuff. So when you're in the middle of a campaign, you've got to say the things that are going to check the boxes for the folks that are going
Sure.
to primarying you or donating to you and those type of things. So I know I've run 3 campaigns now. I like respectfully and honorably lost all 3. But it's interesting, even with that little experience. One was a state legislature, 2 was the city council. But it was interesting the process, the mental exercise you go through when people ask you questions. Because
Hmm.
you want to be forthright and honest, but even the nuance of how you might say X or Y, you might say exactly the same thing, but just the comma in the wrong place
Yeah.
or something, it really, I, I can't even imagine folks that are real, a big election.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I realized that first one was a pretty high stake state legislative run. Um, and so, in fairness to those who are in those situations in much more significant races than something that I did, I can't imagine the mental exercise of always having to know exactly what I'm saying and how it's going to come across. It's exhausting just thinking about
Oh, I'm sure.
Great. Well, this is, I think, guys, this has been a great way for us to put a bow on the country's, like Karen said, whatever we just went through our birthday celebration, and I think, as we look towards, what is beyond our 250th birthday, I think it's important to see what we're going to make next, and I think these are great points and conversations we're going to head towards. So. Thank you both. Look forward to talking to you next week. I'm sure, we'll, God knows in the last 24 hours, things shifted. Have plenty to
it.
talk about. So
Yeah.
great. Thanks a lot,
Thank,
guys. See
Thanks.
ya.
thank you.